Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We are very honored to have some very esteemed and high-level investors here with us this evening. I think the biggest challenge that I will have during this webinar is holding everybody to some kind of a time limit so that we don't end up all over the place, because everybody who's with me this evening has so much knowledge and loves to share it with people. So thank you to Marcin and Lauren and Glen for joining us this evening as our speakers. And thank you to everyone who is able to join us as attendees. There's been a lot of talk well, I guess there always is, but there's been a lot of talk recently that I've seen about, as the Canadian market gets more and more heated and it becomes harder and harder to find properties where the numbers actually work, there's a lot of people turning to look at the US. And that's why I thought this would be such a timely webinar for us to do, so that we can sort of learn the fundamentals about how we get started in the US. How do you choose a market? There's some pretty big names who've headed down there, including the girls, Rochelle and Alyssa from Epic Alliance. So when you start to see things like that happen, you go, what am I missing and how do I get a piece of this? So I'm going to do a little screen share. We'll just go through some of the housekeeping for this evening and introduce the speakers, and then we'll be able to get going. So thank you to everybody who joined us. Just a little bit of sort of an orientation for you. So the way I like to do webinars, I like to keep things interactive. So you'll see on the bottom of your screen, there should be a chat box. So please go ahead if you want to comment on something a speaker said. If the speaker asks a question and you want to be interactive, please go ahead, use the chat, and let's keep a dialogue going. In the event that you have a specific question for a speaker, please go into the Q&A tab and put your question there. If you put it in the chat box, chances are time will pass before the speaker has a chance to answer and it'll get lost. So for dialogue and interaction, use the chat box. For specific questions, please go into the Q&A tab. And if possible, if you would like to address this question to a specific person, put their name first and then put the question in, and then we'll try our best to make sure that we get enough time to be able to answer the questions. I kind of suspect we're going to make it about a third of the way through everything that we want to get through, but people can always follow up with the speakers at the end. I know everybody loves to interact. So just one more reminder, when you come into the chat box, at the bottom, there will be an option. So you will come in and it will default to panelists only. Please click the drop down and click host and everybody else in the webinar. And that way everybody sees your comments as opposed to just the panelists or the host. So that should be good for everybody there. My name is Elizabeth Kelly. I would like to welcome you to this evening's webinar. We are so fortunate to have an absolute wealth of information. I was thinking as everybody was joining, we probably have about 60 years worth of US real estate investing experience in the room. So absolutely a gold mine of information, and I'm really excited to hear what everybody has to say and hear about how the US market has changed and see if it sort of follows along the same lines of the Canadian one. Personally, I've been an investor for 15 years. We have done some things in the US, but it's been a long time, and that was really my husband's thing. He liked to buy tax liens and deeds in Florida. That was his big thing. I was a trainer for Rich Dad Canada for 8 years. I am now an investment coach and mentor, and I also have an active property management company, and I'm an active buy, rent, and hold investor. So we are joined this evening by Glen Sutherland. Glen is an active investor in both the US and Canada, and he has a wealth of information. He hosts a podcast, has a YouTube channel, Canadian investing in the US, so provides and is very comfortable providing a ton of the US, also does mentoring and coaching for people who want to learn how to invest in the US as well. We have Marcin who's joining us, and Marcin is also obviously a US investor, and his specialty is sourcing funds. So as of this date, he's sourced over $250 million for business ventures. I don't think there's many of us who can say that. So, you know, Marcin has heard an awful lot of no's to build his enormous portfolio, where Marcin's over 300 units now. And he also has a podcast. I feel like I'm missing out. Maybe I should be hosting a podcast too. But Marcin's podcast is called The Game, which is where he interviews some of the top minds in business, sports, and life. And I'm sure there's some cool items that have come out of that for you that you've been able to apply to your investment strategies. And then we are fortunate to have Lauren, and Marcin and Glen are both investors. And I sort of think Lauren is kind of the glue that brings everything together. Lauren is an international lawyer, and there's not that many of those around. She went to York, which I did as well. So yay us. And Lauren now is in the US. I think you're in Florida, aren't you, Lauren?
I am in South Florida, yep.
Perfect. And so Lauren's area of expertise is helping Canadians establish the framework that they need in the US to begin to start investing. Because it's not as easy as you might think to be a non-resident buying property in a country. So we're fortunate to have Lauren, who will provide sort of the legal perspective and kind of the overarching ideas and concepts that I think will be important for us today. So the structure for this evening's webinar is we're going to go through, I have some prepared questions based on what I think is important, you know, in my conversations with people in my Facebook mastermind group. And so we're going to cover the fundamental questions, and then we'll be able to open up with whatever time we have left to be able to see what everybody who is here would like to learn. So our first question for the panelists is going to be, how is investing in the US different from investing in Canada? Obviously, that's going to be a pretty easy one, and we'll get everybody warmed up. And then the next one will be, what's the first thing that a Canadian needs to know or needs to do to prepare for investing in the US? With so many markets, how do you choose the right one for you? How does financing work in the US? What are the best investment structures? I think, Lauren, that one has your name all over it, but I'm interested to hear what the guys are doing too. And then the last one will be, tell us about your biggest learning opportunity. At that point, we'll be able to open it up for the questions that people have put in the Q&A box. So without further ado, I am very happy to kick this webinar off. So why don't we give Marcin first shot? Marcin, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us about how investing in the US is different than investing in Canada? Because I know you've invested in Ontario, now you're out in Alberta, I believe, and you're investing in the US in a couple of markets too. So what do we need to know to start with?
Well, first of all, Elizabeth, thank you for hosting this, putting this together. I know this takes a tremendous amount of effort, and you make this whole Zoom thing look pretty seamless. So thank you. I've got lots to learn from you there. So as far as I don't want to start off on a negative note, but the biggest difference between Canada and US, in my experience, is in Canada, everybody sort of operates on this premise of goodwill and disclosure. In my experience in the US, the attitude seems to be, if you let me screw you, it's your fault. And I don't know how Glen or Lauren feels about that, but for me, as soon as I read that question, as a Canadian, as somebody who grew up here, I just started laughing because that was the first thing that came to my mind. So
that's buyer beware to the
buyer beware, 100%.
That's
Okay.
why Canadians like me, because I'm still Canadian.
Yeah.
Even Glen likes me.
Yeah. Listen, there's a billion reasons to invest in the US, but the major difference in my mind is you need to go in there with the buyer beware thing, because there are things in the US that you have never seen in Canada. So
yeah. No, it's a good thing. And always be doing your due diligence with everything. Like there's all these apps that can teach you how, can give you prices of properties, that can give you rents of properties. They have so much information out there. There's so many people who've created so many things, but it's good to run your numbers with those, but that you need to verify every number. Those are not the be all end alls, or you are going to have a surprise when you get to the end, because that ARV may not be where you thought it was. A lot of it is just based on square footage and neighborhood sort of stats, and it may not be your property. Your property may not be able to do the layout that property has. There's lots of things to think about, but I trust things. I trust information I get from people. I trust sheets I get from people, but I verify everything, because you can only go so far, but trust but verify. That's a big thing.
I love that, because the US, you do have so much more access to information. I mean, everything is online there, all the comparisons, everything. But I love that, Glen, because most of us would be like, oh, this is great information. And we just take it without questioning it or without thinking about it. And that could really get you into some hot water for sure.
Yeah, I made a small list before we came, because you gave me the questions ahead of time, which is nice. But I think the big thing that's going to shock people is the lending is a lot different. The lending that we have as Canadians is going to be different. The lending, even if you are an American who's living in Canada, is going to be different. Every single scenario is different. People make mistakes about quoting out loans even, and they don't understand the difference between a purchase loan, a refi loan, a fix and flip loan. Do some research. I think I'm kind of answering several questions at the same time, but figure out how lending works. And I teach it. There's 10 episodes on my show that give it away for free. Or look at other podcasts. I'm sure Lauren's had tons of people on her show. Marcin's had people talk about lending. Lending is a lot different. The way they structure things is different. The way the fee structures are in lending is different. The big thing is I just got a loan for my new principal residence. That's why everything looks a little different if you're used to seeing the podcast. And all the loans, all the fees are built into the loan. I don't pay for them. Whereas in the States, you pay those fees up front. And that's one of the big reasons why buyers will ask for closing credits. They'll ask for you to pay the closing costs, because the bank will say, here's your pre-approval and here's how much money you need to give as your deposit. And people save up to that amount and go buy the house, but they don't think about these other fees. And if you're doing flipping and stuff, you're going to have a lot of people at the closing table asking you to pay these closing fees that you should have in your calculator, right? So lending is different. Property taxes are very different. The price of property taxes can vary from state to state by a ton. It varies a lot in Canada. My Alabama property taxes, I can get a 2,000 square foot house, and I pay $500 a year for property taxes. That same house, if it's sitting in Florida, is going to be triple that. If it's sitting in Indianapolis, it's going to be $1,000 a month. So it varies a lot. I think it varies a lot everywhere you go, but you got to do some research before you're going into anywhere. Laws. Every state runs different judicial system. Your landlord-friendly states, and you can Google that. But what is a landlord-friendly state, and what is important to you about a landlord-friendly state? Is it about how long it takes to do an eviction? Is it if there's a judgment? What parts of it are important to you? And maybe search that part. The typical thing is how long evictions take is when you look for landlord-friendly states on Google. That's where they're going to tell you down that line. And it changes. It changes every single year. If you pull the list of where they say the landlord-friendly states are, it changes because COVID changed a lot of things. There's all kinds of eviction memorandums that are on in certain states, and there's lots of states that don't have them. And that will change all the numbers. And I think the biggest reason that everyone is interested in the US is the price points are so different. This $1 million house here could be a $400,000 house in Florida, and it could be a $100,000 or $200,000 house in Ohio. And all the markets are running on different cycles and at different speeds. And it's just a lot to put together when you're trying to find that perfect place to go. And I'm kind of jumping all over the place with my stuff. But anyway.
I think that's good, Glen. That's good to get us started.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just going to go everywhere.
I'll try and wrangle you in. You're going to make this evening fun for me.
Yeah.
Okay, Lauren, what can you add to that?
I sort of took it over. I'm sorry, Lauren.
Oh, Glen, you know, it's hard to compete with you. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, Glen is one of my lovely clients that we've worked. That's why we know each other so well. He's seen me at my best and worst, and hopefully mostly my best.
Yep.
The fact is that, look, I'm here in the US. So I've been through all the stuff. Not just is lending different, banking is different, everything is different. I remember when I first moved here and I was renting a place and I had post-dated checks. They didn't even know what that was. So it's just like the whole learning curve, like basically not, I help people invest in real estate, set up their structure, and potentially immigrate and get visas through real estate. My signature program is how to immigrate through real estate. The fact is, it's overwhelming. The stuff Glen is addressing, it just shows you how many things there are to consider, and every state is different. And then where do you want to set up your structure, and where do you want your home base to be? And do you want to potentially get a visa? And how does that all look? So there's just so much to think about. And the most important thing that I think, and this is a little self-serving, but I think Glen will agree, is to work with, and I'm sure Marcin would as well, but we haven't worked together yet, is to find somebody that you can trust, that a trusted advisor to help move you through the process, whether it be a real estate coach and some attorneys and a cross-border accountant. Because without a cross-border accountant, your Canadian accountant or your American accountant doesn't give a you-know-what about what happens. So people set up these LLCs and then they're like, wait a minute, now I have to pay double taxation? Yeah, because you just followed the thing it said on the internet. Because the information overload can kill you. So just remember, the same principles do not apply in the US as in Canada, and the same principles do not apply across state lines. So make sure you get somebody that you can trust to help you with your foray into US real estate and as you grow your business here.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, Lauren. That's very helpful.
Elizabeth, can I mention one more thing? Because I think it would probably be pertinent here. Another really big difference between Canada and US is Americans are incredibly aggressive. So on the private equity side, on the capital side, there's a ton of money in the US. And you see this with tech companies from Canada going to the US. You see all these Canadian companies going down to the US, and they do it because the capital markets are so deep and so vast. So all these PE firms, these capital firms, they're very aggressive and they're very big. So when you're in the US, you have to be careful and be aware of that, because there's certain markets that are in favor with those groups. And, they have different return profiles, different access to financing, different approaches to business and life philosophically, business. Like in Canada, we're starting to see this marshaling of resources where you're starting to see the large funds coming down and buying 8plexes and 15-unit buildings. In the US, they had this game figured out over a decade ago. Like Blackstone, as an example, they were buying houses right after 08, 09. So Canada, US, there's also different players in the market that are very active and very aggressive.
Okay, that's interesting. Would you say overall that Canada is sort of where the US was 10 years ago, or would you say that that's just in reference to that particular topic that you were referring to?
Yeah, it's funny. I'd say that for a lot of things in Canada, we seem to be 10 years behind the US on a lot of different things, whether it's, implementing certain trade treaties or, economic research or forums or financing or innovative financing structures, access to capital. Canada is much more of a conservative, wait and see type of a culture. Like when I go to the US, every time I go down there, I get excited, but I want to come back to Canada because it's just where I grew up. But the US is much more go, 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 just in general. But yeah, I'd say we're definitely ahead of them in terms of the debt to GDP right now, in terms of households. But I wouldn't say that's a good thing. But yeah, in terms of innovation on the types of products and the types of services, yeah, we're definitely behind.
Perfect. Okay, good to know. So let's move on. Our second question is, what's the first thing that Canadian needs to do to prepare for investing in the US? So we know Lauren is like, build your team, find your team of people, find your people that you can trust who will help you. Once you have that team together, what do you think the next step would be? Glen, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I think a lot of it is education, at least before you jump in there. The biggest mistake I see a lot of people buying is these properties that don't really cash flow that well, and they're not that great of deals. And if they just did a little bit of work, a little bit of research, listen to a few podcasts from any of our people on the show, that they could do a lot better. I think, and they could make a lot fewer mistakes. You can learn a lot from other people's mistakes so that you do not have to do them yourself. And I have made tons of mistakes, and I've learned from my mistakes. And I think that's one of the things is to I don't want to toot my own horn, but work with somebody who's been there. And there's tons of information out there, but I think you really just need to get some education, because like we were saying with the differences, there's a lot of differences, and that means there's a lot of mistakes that could be made.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that holds true in Canada as well. I mean, some of the biggest mistakes, we're not talking about, when you make a mistake in real estate, you're not talking about, I bought like a top and it doesn't fit, so I have to donate it or like give it to my, my kid. We're literally talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. So yeah, for sure. Lauren, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so kind of along the lines of what Glenn was saying, and you're right, is that Elizabeth, you're 100% right. When you're making a mistake in cross-border or domestic real estate investing, it could be fatal. And you could compromise, like people that just look at the internet, and, as a lawyer, the internet is sometimes our best friend and our worst enemy. And people that look at the internet, I mean, there's some huge companies in the US that come into Canada and say, this is how you do it. You guys will agree with me. This is how you do it. Just follow our lead. But they don't care about the CRA, right? And they don't care about the legal implications. They don't care, because Canada's this little country, sadly, big country, small population, and it's dwarfed by this US huge mega power, right? For whatever good or bad, no politics involved. So if you do that and you expose yourself to double taxation, legal liability, you don't set up the right structure, you don't get the right financing in place, you don't get cross-border tax advice, let me tell you, you're going to end up hitting a wall and paying the price dearly later. Whereas if you set the structure up right from the get-go, you not only will pave your way to financial and legal success, but also potentially to having a business that you can go back and forth to and have the ability to live wherever you want. So that's my soapbox.
I love it. So would you say that, choosing your market is not the first thing you need to do, Lauren?
It really depends on who you are, because I don't think that the market necessarily is as important as making sure that you are properly protected. Now, that doesn't mean that the market is not super important, but you have to get that protection in place. Like Glenn invests heavily in Jacksonville, for example, right? And Jacksonville is a very, very good market because it's constantly in a state of flux, and there's great deals. Even still, there's no great deals here in South Florida. Just saying, anybody comes to me, I'm going to send them other places where my partners work. Okay. And that's why I think that it's really important that you have a strategy. I don't work with a client that says to me, okay, I take this back. Clients will say to me, I want to invest in Florida, lots. I want to invest in Arkansas. I want to invest in Ohio. I want to invest in Illinois. I want to invest. Okay, great. But the most important thing is a strategy, because I don't care where you want to invest. I don't care how much you want to invest. If you don't have a strategy, you got nothing. And you don't want to work with me if you don't have a strategy, because I'm going to drive you crazy. Right, Glenn?
Sure.
But that's my job, because if I don't drive you crazy and make sure that your butt is covered in the process, who are you going to come back to? Me.
Yep.
That's so interesting, because in Canada, we find that lawyers are very much segregated by province. And, like an Ontario lawyer isn't going to support a client who's going and doing business in BC, for example. So it sounds to me like there isn't that structure in place in the US.
There is, but it's a little different. And also, because I'm a realtor as well as a lawyer, and because I have an international, I have 60,000 realtors at my disposal just at a click of a mouse. And so that makes a difference in terms of where I'm developing business. And I also have a team of lawyers that are pretty much in every state that can help with setting up entities in that state or that structure. Like maybe not in the states where, you know, like the little states, but in the major states like Georgia, like Alabama, like Arkansas, like Florida, obviously, like California, Texas, you know, Michigan. So if there's a demand, my goal and my role is going to be to find you the best strategic partner that they work under me. So if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they don't only have to answer to you, they have to answer to me. And let me tell you, nobody wants to answer to me. Just ask my kid, he'll tell you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Marcin, what about you? What was the first thing you did, or what were the steps?
I don't want to answer to Lauren either.
Trust me, you don't.
Sorry, Elizabeth, you were saying?
No, I was just wondering, what were the steps that you went through when you decided you wanted to start investing in the US? That was what, about 5 years ago you started?
So the first time we went down to the US was back in AZ in 08, 09, back then. And then that was after the subprime wreck happened. We were down buying, at the time, what were we doing? Multifamily, and then we were doing commercial. We were doing strip malls, like smaller strip malls. They were about a third, half empty. And we were just getting, and our dollar was par, as you remember. So it was a good time. But as I was listening to Lauren,
dollars at par for sure.
I was thinking, yeah, exactly. As I was listening to Lauren, I was kind of chuckling, you know, getting advice off the internet. My dad runs a European auto shop in Toronto, and he has a sign because people come into his shop and they self-diagnose their cars, and they come in and they bring them in, and he looks at it and he has a sign on the wall now. It says, "If you Googled your problem and are looking for a second opinion, might we suggest Bing?" Basically, you know, if you're going to Google your answers and self-diagnose things, you're going to, you know, you're kind of on your own, right? So look, the first thing, obviously, and Lauren said it, you have to have a strategy. Don't go to the US because it's the flavor of the month or flavor of the year, because it's more than you bargained for, guaranteed. Because we're talking about all the differences. It's like learning how to, I don't know, pour your own ice rink in your backyard because the kid wants to go skating once. Just buy a ticket, go to the rink, just go skating, go have fun and come home. Don't worry about it because it's too much work. But if you're committed to the process and you want to build a sizable portfolio, then yeah, the US is a tremendously, profit. The economics are different. I mean, you can buy, Glenn knows this, you can buy houses for the price of kitchens compared to Toronto. Oh yeah. So the math isn't even fair, right? But with that comes its own challenges. And to Glenn's point, my advice to anybody who's going down to the US for the first time is don't try to hit a home run, try to understand the process. And whether you work with someone like Glenn to coach you, or you invest passively with a fund that's investing in the US or a limited partnership or whatever it is, just spend the time and the energy to learn the differences, not in the real estate, because dirt is dirt is dirt. It's what surrounds the dirt, whether it's the legal, the accounting, the reporting, the IRS, the context of the situation is what you really need to understand. And again, if you want to do it actively, somebody like Glenn from a coaching perspective could be fantastic. Then somebody like Lauren, those are the types of things. But I mean, to answer your question, I guess directly is, make sure you're committed to a strategy, because if you're gonna invest in it, you're investing for the long term. It's not just, oh, this is cool this month, and what are we doing next year?
Absolutely. Because it sounds to me like the structure as well, and if I'm remembering correctly, the structure as well is time consuming and costly to set up. So it's definitely not a flavor of the month. It's, you're going to be working at this for a little while, perhaps in conjunction with continuing to invest in Canada too. Yeah. Lauren says you should consider whether you eventually or sooner want a visa that will impact the type of investing. That's good to know as well. So it sounds like a plan is what I'm hearing from people is, pick your strategy, find your team, have your plan, and know what you want to do. Okay, that's fantastic. I hope everybody who's attending is getting a lot out of this as well. So with so many different markets, how do you choose the right one for you? Do you want to take that one first, Marcin? Like, how do you know, okay, I should be in Cleveland, or I should be in, I don't know, LA, or like, how do you decide? Because I mean, there's a lot of markets in Canada, but there is exponentially more in the US.
Yeah, well, and so the reason why I think all three of us said get your strategy figured out first is because your strategy will drive the type of markets that you want to look at. So, you know, if you're a fix and flip investor, you might be looking for certain types of markets. If you're investing, if you're a value add, you know, buy and hold, refinance, multifamily investor like I am, I look for different types of markets. And it sounds like Glenn and I look for similar things. Yeah. So, you know, for me, I mean, I have a bias. I like bigger markets, and I don't mean bigger by US standards like Chicago or New York. I mean, bigger in the context of what a Canadian city would be considered a big city. So in Canada, Calgary, you know, Mississauga, these are big cities. They're a million plus MSAs. In the US, 1 million people is a secondary, sometimes a tertiary market. Like for Americans, 1 million people in a town is not a big city. Personally, I like those types of towns because they're, you know, a lot of the, again, I mentioned at the beginning, the institutional investors, the big boys with the, you know, deep pockets investment theses, they're typically looking at larger markets. So places like I've invested in, actually Jacksonville, where I'm looking at now, and other markets, those are big markets by our standards as Canadians, and certainly they're 1 million plus, you know, metro area. But for the big institutional guys, they're not registering yet. Now, my theory is that they will eventually come to those markets, but they're not really kicking around in those markets yet, which means we're not seeing the crazy growth drivers there. Other things I look for is I look for markets where you're not going to be able to download the jobs as quickly. I mean, automation, AI, you know, all this stuff is changing so quick, but there's certain things that you're not going to get rid of overnight. So logistics, transportation corridors, you know, for me, that was a big thing, is a big thing. Last market I invested in Canada was Winnipeg, because you had Magellan Aerospace, you had Boeing, you had New Flyer Industries, big bus manufacturer, Bison, Reimer, all these big bus, trucking, logistics, heavy, you know, good paying blue collar jobs. You know, I found the same thing in Memphis. You've got FedEx's global headquarters there. Their baseball field is called AutoZone Park. It's a very, you know, it's a very predictable, you're not going to, I don't see those jobs going anywhere anytime soon. So when you combine that with a good size MSA and you combine it with a low cost of housing relative to people's income, to me, that's just a great way to be. I mean, where else are you going to buy apartments, in our case, apartments or apartment buildings for $30,000 to $50,000 more? And I mean, you know, you can't buy a parking spot in most Canadian cities for that. So,
no, that's very true. Very true. Thank you, Marcin. That was a great answer. What about you, Glenn? How did you choose the markets where you're investing?
Sure. The first market I picked was Alabama. And it wasn't when I first started down there. These are the kind of mistakes you'll make, is you'll pick it passion markets. And I picked it because it was more affordable than Nashville. And I wanted to go to Nashville all the time because I love Nashville. So it was really, really close. It's like a 30-minute drive. But anyway, to get to the real meat and the potatoes. So if you guys have pens and papers, I'm just going to give you some good stuff. Landlord laws. You're going to want to check landlord laws, which we touched on before. So I'm not going to touch on it again. Growing populations versus degrading populations. And it doesn't mean that going into, say, Detroit is a bad idea, because Detroit is declining, but sometimes you don't get every single point on the list, right? And some of those markets are still very strong. But I'm looking for landlord loss, growing population, a good rent to value ratio. And what that means is what everyone throws out, the 1% rule. The 1% rule was created by turnkey operators. So you should be able to do better than that if you're a good investor. So the 1% rule is if a property rents for $1,000 a month, it should be $100,000 purchase price, is the sort of thing. But if you're combining strategies like BRRRRs or renovations of any kind going into any strategy afterwards, a lease option, whatever, flips, any sort of renovation will totally destroy these numbers, because those numbers were created for, basically turnkey properties. But good rent to value ratios. You in New York City, you're gonna have a real hard time. You go into like Los Angeles, you're gonna have a really hard time to get good numbers. Appreciation. Another rule I look for is the 20% rule. So this is what Marcin was talking about when you get into some of these smaller towns. You don't want the largest or the main employer to have 20% of the population working there, because that's a one-horse town. There's a whole bunch of other people there, but you get into a 20% company. So this happens all the time with Amazon. They go into these little markets outside of the city and put this big warehouse, and everyone flocks in there, invests all their money. But you know what? Amazon will move again when someone else gives them the tax breaks. Same thing with all these big industries. Northern Texas and Alabama, they gave huge bursaries, huge pieces of land, no taxes for years. And you know what? Tons of stuff moves in. You know, when that expires, they could move again. Who knows? But depending where they are, sometimes they're in markets that are strong and sometimes they're in one-horse towns, right? So know where you're investing, right? So 20% rule, the 100K population. And this is actually a rule I added because of lending. If you get into these towns, their bedroom communities outside of the city, sometimes they are the best place in the world to flip because their school zones are all new houses, far phenomenally rated higher than everyone else. And everyone in that metropolitan area wants to move out just outside of town to get in these things. And you can do really great things flipping there. But if you're going to buy and hold in those things, people do want to rent there. Would love for you to provide housing in those areas. The problem is if you get under 100,000, the number of lenders shrinks. We are Canadians. So if there's this many lenders and then you go, oh, Canadians, you got this many lenders. And then you go, I'm going to now limit that even more. You're making your life more difficult than it needs to be. So pick a strategy that works for the area you're going. Like I just said, you want to flip in those markets, you can do amazing because everyone wants to live in those areas, but it doesn't make any sense. Well, I've done it and it does make sense, but you're going to work a lot harder to do it. Yeah. So that was my quick list of stuff to go through to check.
That's fantastic.
And if you take my course, like we go through, once you decide on that, you can go in, check this. You want to check school zone ratings. You want to check crime ratings. And the school zone ratings, Canadians, that's one of the big things. It just goes over their head and it's not important because schools in Canada as a whole are fairly even. They're not that different from one school to the other. In the US, they can be very different, and people will pay way more money to go to a certain school than another different school. And sometimes the biggest thing is they'll look at neighborhood lines, right? I'm going to buy just on the other side of that line, but that goes to a different school zone, different crime map, everything. And they think I can just expand the line a little bit, but that line will never move. Sometimes it's a highway, sometimes it's just a road, and those houses on one side of the road can look almost the exact same as the other side of the road and cost twice as much for the exact same house because the neighborhood it's attached to. And that we don't have that. We don't have the same thing here.
That's some great insider information. I love that. Thank you, Glenn.
Welcome.
Lauren, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with both of these gentlemen. And the fact is that the US is so different. Actually, I have a Canadian who just moved here. He just got his visa. He's my cross-border tax guy. And he is from Ottawa and he is looking for a home. And he was looking in a couple of locations, and we just put an offer in yesterday and we were talking about some other options today. And I said, look, between these two places, you do not want to raise children, and he's like, oh, wow. And it's so true. Like the US, as much as we think that the US is the same, okay, and in a lot of ways there's similarities, but let me tell you, it's not the same. And that's why you need a visa to get here. If we are not citizens of the US, we're Canadians. I'm a dual citizen now, but Canadians are different. We are different. We're community oriented. We have a different mentality. We look after each other in a different way. I mean, just look at COVID. It's a true example of that, okay? Without getting into politics. And I wanted to also throw something in there about the lending, because these gentlemen keep mentioning lending. And I have a really cool, and Glenn, I haven't even talked to you about this yet, because this is like a really, really cool opportunity. I have a strategic partner. They're in Israel, and they built an AI program only so far for Israelis and Canadians to provide lending for non-owner occupied units of up to 4, like up to quadplex. All over, I'm sorry, not all over, in like about 10 states so far. They will be all over the US. Marcin, happy to make a connection. These are amazing people. They've already funded 4 of my clients. And it's just amazing, because it is one of the biggest challenges that people face when they are investing in the US. So just to give you an option that's available, it's brand new and it's hot off the press. And I have, like I said, I haven't even told Glenn about it yet.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Marcin, what would you like to add to that?
Wow. Well, don't make any assumptions, I think, is probably the best advice. Anything that you think you know about Canada that's applicable in the US, chances are, you know, in some cases you're correct, but in a lot of cases you're just dead wrong. I mean, I remember I was looking at an apartment building not too long ago, and as Glenn had alluded to, the school zone line was literally just across the street. And the school zone that the building was in was not something that would appeal to mom and dad with 2 young kids. So it doesn't matter how, see, and if I didn't pay attention to that, it wouldn't matter how much of a meaningful upgrade I made to the property. I would never be able to drive rents based on my assumptions of across the street, because kids on that side of the street would never go to that school. And, you know, I see in the comments here, people writing, like, literally, you know, when you see people drive in the US, one street to another, the reason why there's potholes and shopping carts in some areas and brand new basketball courts is because that line may very well be that property tax line that funds that side of the street. And in Canada, to Glenn's point, you know, we have a pretty even distribution of school talent throughout an area. Yeah, so don't make assumptions. That's probably the best way to sum that up, I think.
Love that. So a question for you: if someone is just starting out, they don't own properties in Canada or the US, would you suggest that they start in Canada to get some of the fundamentals and learn, or, you know, would you say it doesn't really matter where you start, you're going to have your challenges and you know, pick a place and start there?
So that's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. I think because I started with investing in my own backyard, and it did give me a good insight to how property management works, how doing it all myself works, which is that's not what I want to do. When you picture your future, you don't picture going there on weekends and fixing stuff. And you don't picture all this. You picture the money, the wealth, and the time and freedom that is given you. It is a good way to understand how much time stuff takes, how to be patient with people because you've been there. But in all honesty, if you were going to even invest in Canada, the likelihood is your backyard in Canada isn't the best market in Canada. Right? So I would, even if you're going to stick with Canada, which is still plenty of great markets, I am not going to be the one to say, don't invest in Canada. There's still plenty of good provinces that have good landlord laws, but I would say pick the same rules. Don't get lazy. Still go through the same analysis and find the market that works the best in either country. And I think you can do this. I think there's some extra learning to doing it from a distance, but I think it's good for you to not be doing everything, because you're just creating a new job for yourself. I don't believe in self-management anymore. I did it for, 8 years or so with my own Canadian properties, and it was miserable. Like just spend my weekends there, spend a week between tenants to renovate. It's not farm it out. Even if you're in Canada, farm it to somebody else and get that thing turned faster so you can be making rent again. And if you can apply that same principle in your backyard or in a different part of the province you live in or a totally different province, then you can apply the same principle to the US.
Okay, good, thank you. Marcin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's one of those things where I think to myself, you know, what is the outcome? What is the goal? What do you want to accomplish? Because there's people that, I'm biased. I think everybody should be invested in real estate, but not everybody should be a real estate investor, right? So I have plenty of friends that are making 6-7 figures a year. They want to put their money in real estate, you know, keep up with inflation. I mean, I was at the grocery store. I saw noodles, like those ramen noodles that I used to eat when I was in college. Things used to be 10-20 cents a pack. They're $1 now. So, you know, I'm not that old, but they're 10 times more expensive, right? So, you know, I have friends that, you know, make 6-7 figures. They just want to put their money into something that's going to grow. And, you know, that's a different mindset than somebody who says, you know what, I hate my job. I hate being a dentist. I hate being a mechanic. I hate being a lawyer, whatever it is. I want to be a real estate investor. Because, you know, either way, there's a baseline of education that you need to make sure that you make good decisions, whether passively or actively. But ultimately, if you're somebody who wants to be active in the business, then, you know, initially I did the same thing Glen did. I managed my own properties. I mean, I don't do it anymore. I mean, when I bought my first one when I was 21 years old, when I went in to fix stuff, the tenant thought I worked for the property management company. It was good because I was just a child, right? But, you know, and then, you know, you learn. It's just the experiences of having the tenant just berate you and then, you know, quote certain sections of the lease that you're just like, really? You read that? Really? That's how you read that? Like, it's just good that you have those experiences at least once. You know, go to the RTP, get yelled at for not having one of the 4 burners on a stove working, and therefore you've hindered the tenant's ability to provide nutrition for their family. It's good for you to have, see, Glen's laughing because you know, Elizabeth, you've probably seen this stuff. So like people, it's good to have those experiences if your plan is to be active and build it as a career path, as a life way to live your life. But if you're looking to be more passive, then it's different. I think you need to be more informed conceptually on it. You need to know structures, you need to know deal flow management, governance. But, you know, that's a different path. There's plenty of people that run the biggest, you know, institutional private equity funds that don't own apartment buildings themselves, yet they manage billions of dollars on behalf of other people. So, you know, getting informed is important, but I think what's more important is, do you want this to be your life, or do you want to just have some money in it as you continue to build your, you know, your dental practice, or you continue to be a school teacher, whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's something that a lot of investors need to think about, because everybody sort of assumes when they're starting out that they're going to self-manage. And the reality is not everybody is cut out to self-manage. I have to say, in my 15 years as a property manager, I have got a thicker skin than I ever thought I'd have. Like, you know, the first time somebody said something mean to me, I went home and cried. And now they're swearing at me on Facebook, and I'm just, you know, it rolls off you in a different way. So, I think that's a great tip too. I mean, if you're going to buy at a distance and you're not going to property manage, then you really are a lot more focused on buying in a market where the numbers really make sense than you are in trying to buy in your backyard. Lauren, did you want to add something? I don't know much about your portfolio or where you kind of invest or buy.
Well, I think that the important thing to add to all of this is about, you know, doing it all yourself or not doing it all yourself. And, you know, I dabble in real estate investing. I'm more of the guide than the investor, but I do definitely have investment properties, and actually we're about to purchase one now here, believe it or not, which is shocking. But anyway, the market here, I've never seen it like this, and I've been here for 20 years in South Florida. It's like Toronto. It's like 30 offers over asking, appraisal contingencies waived. It's insane, like insane. But what I was going to say is, just like in the E-Myth and trying to do everything yourself, you know, I'm the quarterback in my company. I am the go-to, the general contractor, so to speak, and I bring in the people that do what they do best, like cross-border tax advice, which if I gave it, would really be a bad idea because people would end up paying triple taxation or something. But the point is that what you need to know when you're starting your career in real estate investing or developing it or growing it or whatever is how to go to the people like Marcin and like Glen that have been there and done that and can create joint ventures with you or guide you or coach you and help you and work through some of the kinks with you, because at the beginning, you're not going to know everything. And even halfway through, you're not going to know everything because things change. Did any of us expect COVID or this second bout that's going on right now? Okay, I mean, so we have to really kind of gear up our engines and be ready to work together and collaboratively and help each other and realize that there's no I in team. And I think that that's really important to remember when you're building your real estate portfolio.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great, Lauren. We're deviating a little bit here, but I really wanted to ask, because somebody brought it up earlier, competition. Lauren, I think you said, 10 times the population, 10 times the competition. So, a lot of Canadians we're talking about the challenges with finding properties and, not finding off market and that kind of thing. So people are like, oh yeah, bigger markets, higher population, more buildings, but also more competition. How do you deal with competition? Glen, how do you sort of pick up properties without, are you participating in 30 offers on a property?
No, not at all. So when you're buying houses, the idea to beat all of the competition is to be better than the competition. And that sounds so cliche, but what is important? Where are you buying these deals from? Are you buying from a realtor? Are you buying from a wholesaler? Are you buying from a tax deed? Where are you buying these things? I buy a lot of my stuff from wholesalers. So think of it from their perspective. What is important to them is to sell this property quickly, get the stress off of their thing. So if you want to move to the top of their list, when they send you a deal, analyze it quickly, give them feedback quickly, and they will respect that. And whenever and give them a criteria of what you're looking for, tell them exactly what you're looking for. And then when they give you that criteria, this is the biggest thing of all, buy it. Whenever they've done what you've asked, pull your side through and buy the property. And you know what happens? They teach wholesalers, create these massive lists, email these people. And what happens is they find a deal, they send it out, and they get like 1,000 emails back with questions. And it's a painful process for them to go through all these questions. If you can become the person that they send the deal to, you analyze it quickly and get it back to them and just give them some feedback, they'll send it to you before they send it to the list, because they have to answer one question or two questions, not 1,000 questions. And whenever they do give you something, you buy it, you know what happens? You turn the top of their list. They won't send it out to the whole thing because it's a pain for them. You solve other people's pain is really how you do all real estate. If people need out of a house, you find a win-win. You solve people's pain, and that's how you succeed.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we see that with wholesalers in Canada as well. I was chatting with Luke Boyron a few months ago, and I asked him what the biggest challenge is. And he said people who buy deals or take deals and they don't have their financing in order, and it comes down to crunch time and they can't close. And that's the fastest way to get knocked off a wholesaler's list, is to not have your financing in place. And I could see it being even more crucial in the US.
Yeah. And if you can, the old cliche is cash is king, and it is. And if you're buying houses under $100,000, I think we're going to be talking about financing, but have your financing in place. And this is the thing, you talk to wholesalers, they're not going to let you use a conventional loan to close. They're not fast enough. It's not going to happen. So have your hard money lined up, or your cash, or your private money. Be the guy that, I like this deal and I can close in 2 days. Once the title work is done, I can close. If you be that guy, that's how you'll be at the top of the list. Be ready.
Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Marcin, what about you? How do you make sure you stand out from your competition? How do you lock up properties?
Oh, Glen kind of summed it up pretty good there. I mean, essentially, last two buildings we bought, we bought cash. I mean, one of them we assumed some financing, other one we just bought, both were cash essentially. So make it painless, make it easy. I mean, the building we bought last summer, about a year ago, it was 80 some odd units. We got a call from the lender. The lender was having issues with the owner. We just took it over. We wrote a check, took it over, assumed the financing, and basically solved everyone's problems. And it took days, not weeks, not months. We did our underwriting. We figured out the, numbers made sense. Everything else checked out. And, we're able to step in. So, I mean, the biggest thing is that, and, those relationships, because I mean, talk is cheap. And in real estate, there's a lot of people that want to do deals. They do a course, they do a seminar, and then they just run around and, everything's interesting, everything's shiny. And the people that are on the sell side are always very frustrated because they'll figure out pretty quickly if you're serious or not. So for example, what Glenn was saying, I call that a buy box. So I have a buy box. I go to market. I say, hey, I'm looking for this within these parameters. If you have it, I'm in. Like I'm good. Like just this is what I want. And as soon as that comes in, like there might be some clarifying questions, or maybe there's a little bit of assumptive selling there on the wholesaler's part. But you can work through things pretty quick, and they know what to bring you. And then what ends up happening is they end up looking for your deal. It's like when you see a red minivan. And then all of a sudden, every red minivan, because your mom bought one, you notice it, and you never noticed this thing before. So if you get your wholesaler on a program where they get you something, that red minivan that you're looking for, and they find that, they're out looking for red minivans after that, and you'll find the deals will come to you. So the best way to differentiate yourself is to have those solid relationships. Commercial real estate, multifamily is the same thing. And from their perspective, even with commercial real estate, these guys, they don't want to spend months marketing a property. They want to know that when they approach somebody to say, hey, listen, sell your property with me because I know somebody that will buy it. And that's powerful. You enable them to go out and make a living. And then that is a huge, it's much easier.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Okay. So Lauren may have to pop off early. So I want to make sure we get our chance to talk to her about the best investment strategies, the best investment structures before, just in case Lauren has to slip out.
Man, oh man, loaded. Okay,
Lauren, what is the one best way?
Can I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see if I can get to my PowerPoint. And I'll go to my slide. Oh, look at that. Oh my God, I just got to my, okay, wow, that was crazy. Okay, so I want to just show you really quickly. I want to show you two slides, okay? This is the slide that's pretty much made me famous, this one. And I'm going to show you this slide about the typical path to investing in the US for foreigners. Okay, this is typical. This is not one size fits all. This is not legal advice. This is not tax advice. This is just a general guide to what usually works for most people to avoid double taxation if they're staying in Canada or potentially getting a visa in the future. Does that sound like a lawyer answer? I couched it with all of the disclaimers I could, okay? So usually you have a foreign holding company, or you have Glenn and Sally is your wife's name, right? I probably have that wrong. What's your wife's name?
Mine, Heather.
Yeah, duh. Okay. So Glen and Heather Sutherland, that are investing in a U.S. entity, okay? Foreign hold co, it could be, because oftentimes, especially Canadian real estate investors have a holding company in Canada, and they use that to own the U.S. company. But the U.S. company should not, generally, I have to say that, should not be an LLC as the entity that is the direct entity holding the properties. In other words, there's an entity in between it. Usually, we set up a limited partnership. Not always, but usually. And that limited partnership it could be set up in Florida, it could be set up in Texas, it could be set up in Wyoming, Nevada, not so much New York, because New York has a lot of additional filing stuff. But the point is that wherever you set up this limited partnership, sometimes there's a limited partnership, a parent limited partnership, and a baby limited partnership, and then an LLC. And that LLC in turn owns the property. Okay, that LLC owns whatever the properties are. And as a guideline, again, not a rule, as a guideline, and these guys will probably say something different because everybody guides differently. As a guideline, we don't like to have more than 500,000 in each LLC to make sure that the liability is dispersed properly. Now in Glen's market that he does some deals in Ohio, that could be 10 properties. In South Florida, that's not going to be 10 properties. It's going to be 1. Okay. So it all depends on where you are, but that's the general gist of what we tend to guide Canadians investing in the US. It's different for others because Canadians have CRA rules and CRAs don't look at they treat LLCs as corps and it becomes a problem and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So this is a guideline. The only other thing I wanted to share with you, and I can share this slide with you, Elizabeth. I know that I gave you one of my gifts, but this is my kind of signature program, 10 steps to immigrate through real estate. The first 8 of these 10 are applicable no matter if you're immigrating, getting a visa or not, because you need all 8 of these steps. And you'll see that these are not in the order I said. I said we need cross-border tax guidance first. Here, the recommended investment is first because this is visa oriented. Okay, but notwithstanding the order, the first 8 of these 10 steps are applicable whether you're planning to get a visa or not. But let me give you a perfect example of what happened about 2.5 months ago. A very, very significant Canadian real estate investor that you would know called me up. Somebody referred him to me. He's a big coach and, you know, has a lot of mentees. And he said, I want to start investing in the US finally, but I don't want a visa. Okay, no problem. Are you sure? Nope, we don't want a visa. It's not in we don't want it. Okay. Within 3 weeks, he said, you know what? I think I might want a visa because I want options. And that's what Canadians are thinking about right now, especially because of COVID, because it's opened doors and said, I don't want to be stuck again. I don't want to be in this situation in the winter if we shut down again, if we're on lockdown, whatever. So what I feel that real estate investing or expanding your business into the US does for pretty much all Canadians is opens doors. It doesn't require you to move here. It doesn't demand that you become a resident. It doesn't even demand that you become a US taxpayer, but it gives you options. I'm going to get off my soapbox again, but I just wanted to share those 2 slides out of my 30 slides because they're really applicable and designed specifically for Canadians. As a matter of fact, this slide I designed because I have a very good friend here who's from Ottawa, not the same guy. I don't know why I'm so connected with these Ottawa people. Anyway, it's a good city. But this gentleman, he was a very big, you guys would know him, big entrepreneur in Ottawa. He lives here on the beach in Delray or like just north of Boca. And we were out for dinner one time. His son plays Little League with mine. And he said, Lauren, what my friends want is just a process. They don't want to think. They want you to hold their hand and say, this is how you start investing. This is what you need to do. Here's your steps, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, I'll create this. So that's where this came from. And that's that.
Wow. And I sort of suspect you've literally taken hours and hours worth of work and boiled it down into one slide. Did I see there, you know, anticipate 15 to 30K US to get this, to go through the process? Is that what I saw there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so, and then what happens is people are like, well, you said 15. Yes, it's 15 for the immigration side with the business plan and the legal and everything. And then it's 15 for your structure. You got to set up your structure. You got to get your limited partnership in place. You've got to, you know, make sure that you have the right cross-border tax advice. So generally speaking, my guideline is 15 to 30. This way, nobody tells me that I didn't warn them ahead of time.
Okay, perfect. That's good to know. And so Sandra had said, does the visa give you more opportunities in the lending? So Glen,
yeah, absolutely, 100,000% of the time, because what the visa does is it gives you access to a social security number, and then you build your credit in the US. So a lot of people, that's definitely a path to different lending options that are not specifically foreign investor oriented. Like these guys on the show, they have access to amazing lending options because they've done a lot of volume. But for those of you that are starting out or want to develop your own credit, that's the best way to do it, is getting a visa and a social security number. It's the only way to build your own personal US credit.
So does it take 2 years to establish your credit in the US the way it does in Canada, or should you plan on longer before you can get loans?
Depends on who you are, to be honest with you, and it depends on who you bank with and how helpful they are. Like I have one guy, for example, that is, he's a British guy. He's in Orlando and he sets up online bank accounts, which was amazing through COVID because nobody could go anyway and set it up, right? And so this is a great option. You don't have to have a social security number to set up a bank account with him. He sets it up and then he helps guide you through the process so that you can start building credit. Now, the other way, there is a way to build a little bit of US credit, which is with an American Express card, a global American Express card, but still, it's still not connected to you. In the US, unlike in Canada, like we have SIN, right? Oh, SIN, isn't that appropriate? Social insurance number. So that's like it. I mean, we all have one and everything. In the US, that you're nothing without that. You're nothing without a social security number. Like I don't exist until I say the last 4 digits of your social security number are. Okay, and the same goes for business entities because each business entity has its own tax ID, which is like the business's social security number. And those are the way that we identify everybody and every business here. And without, like, you can set up a business, but it has it doesn't even exist until you get a tax ID. And so some Canadians, it takes a little bit longer. I just had a guy get his tax ID in a week and a half. But about 6 months ago, it took two months to get it. So just saying, you have to work with somebody that knows the process, because if you think that you set up your company, oh, great, I have a whatever. If you don't have a tax ID, you aren't going to get a bank account.
Absolutely. And how long does it take to get a visa on average? You're looking at about a year?
No. So do you want to talk about like COVID or like normal?
Can we do both?
So I had 4 clients get their visas in the past couple of months that were in the backlog, meaning that they were like, you know, in the queue because the consulate was closed. The Toronto consulate was closed for a long time. There's a couple of options. If you're in the US, you can do what's called a change of status within the US, and you can have premium processing and get it processed in 2 weeks, but you're only able to get an up to 2-year reciprocity. So generally the visa is 5 years. You can get up to 2 years. If you're in the US, you don't have to leave. It's consular processing. It's done internal. I'm sorry, it's done internally, okay, within the US. There's also been some people that have gone for interviews to other countries like Mexico, for example. Canadians could go to Mexico. I don't know if that's stopped now that the consulate is open in Toronto. I'm not sure because I haven't had a client need to do that recently, but that was another option because the Mexican interviews were much quicker. But now the office is open in Toronto, so there is a backlog though. And it's true for pretty much everywhere because there was, you know, like this kind of queue that kept building up. So yeah. I like to say for the most part, you can get a visa within 3 months if you have your business in place and you have a good team and a lawyer that can, you know, move the process through. But some clients can take longer. It just really depends.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. If you need to slip out, your information and insight has been absolutely fantastic. And for those of you who are attending, you'll see in the follow-up or the wrap-up email that goes out, Lauren has very generously included some goodies for you. So you'll be able to check those out and learn more from her as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'll stay for a few minutes, but then we have our family chat on Mondays. And since my family is in Toronto, I need to get on the Zoom with them.
Perfect. And there will be contact information provided for all the speakers as we're wrapping up this webinar. So thank you, Lauren. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge. So Marcin, I would like to go and we'll spend the last few minutes here together talking about financing. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned about US financing. If you had to tell people 1 or 2 things that would help them secure financing or that they should know about financing before they head down, what would they be?
Sure. Well, financing is a lot easier to get when you don't need it. So, duh.
Yeah, true story.
And what I mean by that is, have your money right on the Canadian side first. So in other words, know how you're going to capitalize the house, the building, whatever it is that you're buying down in the US. Make sure you have that figured out on your home front first. If it's your money, are you partnering with people? Are you, how are you capitalizing the asset, right? And I mean, for us, I mean, I've been in the private equity space so for quite a while, and essentially anything we do, we try to think about it on a sort of a broader, we want to be able to make sure the economics make sense. So, Lauren mentioned structures like limited partnerships and LLCs. We typically use LPs, both on the Canadian and the US side, and we make it a very frictionless as possible for our passive investors. So that's something else you need to think about. If you're going to go down with some colleagues, a brother, a cousin, whoever it is, make sure you figure out how you're going to go down there before you do it, because that structure will follow you. And as Glenn was talking about having those wholesalers and being able to do those deals, everything we're talking about here, that flow of funds going down to the US, needs to be as simple as you hitting a button and transferring the money from CAD to USD in the USD. And until you get there, in my opinion, you shouldn't be doing the deal thing. I mean, get educated on the market, figure out where you want to go, why, where, all that stuff. But things like having the banking relationships, because again, we all think the US, oh, it's cool. Yeah, I've been in New York on a weekend. I go to Florida, and we all think it's this same thing, but it's not. You don't exist in the US. You literally don't exist. You might as well be coming over from Germany or from Australia or from Pakistan. They don't care. And because of 9/11 and the Patriot Act and all these other rules and anti-terrorism, you just make sure you have your capital on the Canadian side figured out, how to get your funds to the US down first. And then there's a different approach that you can take when you go down. And again, I'm talking broadly across accounting and legal and securities laws and all that stuff. But ultimately, you need to know how to get your money down to the US, your partners, whoever it is, so that when you go to the lender and you're applying for financing, Glenn's right. If you're an American, your options are this. If you're Canadian, your options are this. If you can show them proof of funds, which you might need for various term sheets, or even with, especially now as the market's more competitive, if you can show proof of funds to even be allowed, in our case, to make a best and final offer on multi, you need to be able to show them that you're already ready to do the deal. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's really important that you can show them the money before you even find the deal. And
Absolutely.
lenders will be that much more tolerant.
Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. Glenn, what about you? What have you learned about financing and how you can set yourself up for success in the US when you're starting out?
So Marcin and I do a different kind of financing too, because he's doing the larger commercial stuff mostly, right? Yeah. So one of the reasons that I did go to the US in the start was that I was maxed. Canadian banks will let you have those 10 properties and, certain number, and you get to the point. There is a lot fewer options, but they have a lot more interesting options that you can go into. So I got into the asset-based lending sort of portfolio that doesn't really, at least as far as I know, it's more limited to commercial buildings in Canada, if you're going to make it equivalent, because it's more similar to commercial lending, right? So it's based on the deal. Does the deal make sense? Will we lend on that? It's kind of a mix between commercial lending and private lending that they have down there. And they have hard money. They have lots of different loan programs that exist, right? And you can get these even on these small single family homes, 4-unit buildings. And it does exist, right? So the interest rates are going to be higher, right? I think the last ones we got were 5.2. So 5.2, 5.4, somewhere in that range that you're going to be able to do it. You're not going to be personally qualifying for these loans. You go, boom, I want to scale my business, right? So I think I want to do personal loans. I want to go down. Also, I do recommend this. If you want to get your first couple loans, if you can qualify for it, a Canadian bank loan, the interest rates are much lower. You want to go to Royal Bank, BMO Harris, TD, Desjardins, National. They're all down there. Florida has all the banks. Many of the states have many of the banks, right? Florida is the hotspot for all the Canadian banks. A lot of them are sitting down there in Florida in the south, and up the East Coast. But you can still find them across the country, everywhere, right? Even if they aren't located there, they can lend in a lot of these places. So a lot of times I say, oh, you want to buy your first one, you want one house, you want to try this out, you want your Airbnb in Orlando. Yeah, go to RBC, TD, all those, blah, blah, and find one of those, and you can do your loan. The thing is, it's not a scalable practice. You're personally qualified for this thing. You're only going to get a couple, 2, 3 loans. It's not scalable. You're going to have to find a way to do this. And I'm Mr. Workaround. You tell me I can't get a bank account. You tell me I can't get a loan. I can get anything. It just takes a lot of work. It's a lot harder to do it, but I will find anything. Persistence. But you can go get into this asset-based lending, and a lot of people just heard like 5% for an interest rate. What? I saw on the Chase website or the Bank of America website, you can get like loans in the low 3s or high 2s, right? And yes, it's more expensive. Does the deal make sense? Because the purchase prices are way lower, property taxes are lower, a lot of things are lower, and maybe, yeah, you have to do some more expensive financing. Your leverage rates might be at 75% loan to value instead of 80. They used to be at 65, but as Canadians, you can qualify for 75 now with a lot of lenders. They are opening programs that Canadians can qualify. They're accepting Canadian credit scores in some programs, some. It does exist. And sometimes they will ask for a Canadian credit score, and it doesn't, they don't actually help you or anything, but it's kind of a thing that makes them a little bit more comfortable if you're trying to qualify your corporation, right? So when I was talking about these asset-based loans, it's to a corporation. They will not lend these to your personal name, right? So a lot of this stuff, even you need bank accounts, you can get bank accounts. You just got to be a little more creative. You're not walking into Chase or Bank of America. You're looking at credit unions and smaller banks that want your business, right? A lot of times all they need from you is something notarized to say you are who you are. And you can do it all from Canada through email. They just want to make sure it's legit. And a lot of places will tell you, we don't accept notary from Canada. We only do it from the consulate. And I went through a whole whack of this through COVID. And the whole thing is, you basically force it right down their throat and you tell them that you're going to have to do this. And I'm going to do this. And we're going to go, or I'm going to switch title companies. And they don't want that. But how about this? You don't lead with your first option. You lead with, I'm going to get a Canadian notary. And then you settle at a Canadian notary who is a lawyer, right? So you've upped it, even though it's the same thing, right? But it's a lot of the stuff, you're going to hear a lot of no's, and it's a lot of pushback. You do everything. You're going to get your checks coming back to Canada, and you go into your local bank here, and they're going to ask to put it on hold. You're going to get pushback from everything. And you just go, look, this is my corporation. Here's corporate docs. I'm not putting a hold on this. Like, I can show you this check will clear. It's every time that they say there's a no, you have to ask why. What is it in your policy that is holding this up? And then you push through it, and you be difficult, and you get what you want. Because there is ways. You talk to title companies and they say there's no way to do this, and you close that property. You talk to banks and they say there's no way you can get a bank account. I will get a bank account. And it's all about pushing. And then once you have the contacts, you can show the contacts because it's already, you've worked it out, the kinks. And I was even telling my students that I had on earlier today, and I'm like, go to this bank, and I don't get a kickback, no referral program to this bank. You just tell them, I want the program, the loans, and I want the bank accounts that Glen set up. And I'm like, I don't get a kickback, just so they know what to do to go around the rules and talk to this person.
Thank you. And I think for all of us watching, I think we all know what has made Glen such a successful investor is absolute bulldog persistence and determination, and not taking no for an answer. And thank you so much to both of you for joining us this evening. I'm just going to wrap up, and then if you guys want to stay on, if people have a couple more questions, then we can certainly cover them. So at the end of all of my big webinars, we always do a giveaway for a book. So this time we have Dalia Barsoom sent us her investor financing, 7 secrets to getting all the money you want. So great tie-in between talking about US financing and obviously this book is on Canadian financing, which, you know, Canadian resources sometimes are hard to come by. I'm about halfway through the book. I'm really enjoying it. I was a mortgage agent and it just breaks things down so easily and explains them so well. So if you're starting out in real estate and want to learn more about the financing journey and how to set yourself up for success in Canadian real estate, then this is a fantastic book. Let's see, Marcin, can you give me a number between 1 and 52? An attendee of this number will be arranged or will be contacted by my VA, Mary Beth, and she will arrange to ship you the book. So Marcin, what's the number for Mary Beth?
52.
52.
Oh, the last person.
Awesome. Thank you. So Mary Beth will follow up with attendee number 52 tomorrow when they come in, or when she sees the recording. Where was I? Oh, sorry, hold on one second here. My controls are all gone. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. So in terms of following up, if you would like to contact any of the speakers or panelists from this evening, here's our contact information. It's kind of neat. Everybody has sort of a different mix of their preferred methods of contact. But you know, everybody is on here because they're looking to network, because they're looking to chat with people. And most of us love to give back to the community that helped us get started. So if you have questions, you know, if you're interested in Glen's course or Marcin's course, or, you know, learning more about Lauren's offerings, then by all means, everybody would absolutely love to hear from you and be able to learn more about you and see if they can help you on your journey moving forward. I have a mini mastermind event. So these are, you know, 1 hour long events that I'm now hosting one Monday a month. And my next one is Monday, August 23rd. I have a couple of interior designers joining me. And I've had the pleasure of working with both of these interior designers in the last little while. And, you know, most of us as real estate investors, we're counting our pennies and, you know, we don't want to put more money in than we need to into a renovation or into a reboot on a property. But let me tell you, working with an interior designer, I was absolutely floored at some of the ways that they can help us boost our return. So I thought it would be fun to open up a webinar and have people join if you want to learn how working with an interior designer can dramatically increase your ROI on your flips and your burrs and your renovations that you have underway. Don't miss this event for sure. That's Monday, August 23rd at noon. And then my next Monday evening webinar is we're doing liability mitigation for investors. It's not sexy, but it's absolutely essential. You know, what do we need to do? What should we know in order to, you know, reduce the liability as much as possible? I mean, when a lot of us know about corporate structures, but I had a call about a month and a half ago with Milena from Cardinal Law and with Michael Switzer from Switzer Litigation. And I learned a ton of amazing information and things that I can do in terms of protecting myself as a property manager, as a building owner, as a real estate investor. You know, how do I reduce the likelihood that someone is going to sue or that they're going to be able to sue me successfully? And how do I mitigate my liability? So you're more than welcome to join. That one is going to be Monday, September the 13th at 7:00 p.m. So a special thank you, of course, to all of my speakers this evening. It has been such a pleasure to learn more about you and your businesses. And thank you so much for giving back to our community. It's been fantastic. And thank you to everybody who made time to attend. I know it's August and everybody would rather be on the beach, but hey, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your summer.